brick road. Follow the yellow.
The most watched film in history almost didn't have its most famous song. The Wizard of Oz came out in 1939. It has been on television every year since 1956. It is, by multiple estimates, the single most seen film ever made. And the song that defines it, Over the Rainbow, the song that made Judy Garland a star, was cut from the film after the first test screening. The studio thought it slowed things down. They thought children wouldn't understand it. They put it back. But Over the Rainbow was not the only thing they cut. In the middle of the film, there was a 6-minute musical sequence that cost $80,000 and 5 weeks of filming and was removed completely. The footage no longer exists. The song was never heard in any cinema. And the line of dialogue the Wicked Witch still speaks in the final film, "I've sent a little insect on ahead to take the fight out of them," is the only trace left in what audiences see today. Number 1. The film MGM didn't know how to make. The Wizard of Oz began production in October 1938. MGM had purchased the rights to L. Frank Baum's novel and set its ambitions high. This was to be the studio's answer to Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which had been a sensation the previous year. The budget was set at around $2 million. It would end up costing $2,800,000, $500,000 over, making it the most expensive production MGM had undertaken to that point. More than a dozen writers worked on the script, though only 3 received screen credit, and from the very first day of filming, the production was in trouble. The original director, Richard Thorpe, was replaced after just 2 weeks. He had shot Dorothy as a glamorous blonde ingenue in heavy makeup, closer to a fairy tale princess than a farm girl from Kansas. His footage was abandoned entirely. George Cukor stepped in briefly, then Victor Fleming took over and shot roughly 80% of the film. The final scenes, including Over the Rainbow, were directed by King Vidor. 4 directors, 1 film, and it still nearly fell apart before it reached the cinema. Number 2. The Tin Man Who Nearly Died. Buddy Ebsen was a dancer and comedian under contract to MGM. He was cast as the Scarecrow, but Ray Bolger, who had been cast as the Tin Man, wanted the Scarecrow instead. The roles were swapped. Ebsen began filming as the Tin Man. The costume required his face and hands to be covered in aluminum paste, a powder suspended in liquid, applied to create the silver metallic look. He filmed for 10 days. Then, one night, he could not breathe. The aluminum dust had been coating his lungs with every breath he took on set. He was rushed to hospital. "My breathing was excruciatingly labored," he later wrote. "No oxygen seemed to reach my lungs. I wondered if I was dying." He survived, but he never returned to the film. Jack Haley was cast as the replacement Tin Man. The aluminum paste was replaced with aluminum paint for Haley, which, while still uncomfortable, did not carry the same lethal risk. Ebsen's 10 days of filming were set aside. None of it appeared in the released film. He would later become famous as Jed Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies. He never received a credit for his work on The Wizard of Oz. Number 3. The Song They Almost Threw Away. Harold Arlen and E.Y. Harburg wrote Over the Rainbow in May 1938, one of the first songs they composed for the film. Arlen later described the melody as arriving in a single moment of inspiration, fully formed. The octave leap that opens the song, the word "some" landing on one note, where leaping up to another, was deliberate, a musical imitation of a child's longing, something that reaches beyond what is reachable. MGM did not see it that way. After the first test screening, the studio requested cuts to bring the film closer to 90 minutes. Executives felt that Over the Rainbow made the Kansas sequence too long, that it was too slow, and that children in the target audience would not understand what a grown character longing for somewhere else was about. Victor Fleming wanted to cut it. The studio was prepared to lose it. 2 people fought to keep the song in. Producer Arthur Freed, who had championed the project from the beginning, and in most accounts, MGM studio head Louis B. Mayer himself. The song stayed. The reprise of Over the Rainbow that Dorothy sang later in the film, locked in the Wicked Witch's castle, weeping, trying to remember home, did not That version was cut and has never been restored. Number 4. The $80,000 scene nobody saw. In the story as written, the Wicked Witch had a plan before she sent the flying monkeys. She unleashed a creature called the Jitterbug, a small mosquito-like insect colored blue and pink, which bit Dorothy and her companions and forced them to dance uncontrollably until they collapsed from exhaustion. Only then were they weak enough for the monkeys to capture. Composer Harold Arlen and lyricist E.Y. Harburg wrote the song in the spring of 1938. It was one of the first pieces created for the film. The word jitterbug, when they wrote it, simply meant a bug that gave one the jitters. The lyrics made that literal. While the film was being made, the jitterbug became a popular dance craze, which immediately complicated things. The sequence took 5 weeks to rehearse. It was filmed over 4 days in January 1939. It cost $80,000. It ran 6 minutes. After the film's first preview, producer Mervyn LeRoy concluded the film was too long at nearly 2 hours. It ran far above the standard 90-minute feature of the time. He asked for at least 15 minutes of cuts. The Jitterbug was the first to go. The reason given at the time was runtime, but there were others. Studio executives worried that a song named after a current dance craze would date the film and damage its appeal in re-releases. Some accounts also note discomfort with the word jitterbug having associations with alcoholic tremors and with the dance's connection to Black American musical culture at a time when the industry was deeply uncomfortable with that history. Number 5. What survived and what didn't? The Jitterbug sequence was filmed. A full 6-minute song and dance number with the principal cast of the film, in complete costume, on a set built for it. Judy Garland sang. Ray Bolger danced. Bert Lahr performed. Jack Haley, the replacement Tin Man, was in it too. Even though when the sequence was first recorded in October 1938, the role had still belonged to Buddy Ebsen. After the cut was made, the studio did what studios routinely did with trimmed footage. The nitrate negative of the Jitterbug sequence was not preserved. In the 1970s, when the fire department asked MGM to remove flammable nitrate materials from the lot, the studio transferred some of its archive to safer stock and loaded the rest onto a barge and dumped it into the Pacific Ocean. The Jitterbug footage was among what was lost. What survived is this: the complete audio recording of the song, with Garland and the cast singing, a handful of behind-the-scenes photographs taken on the set, and Harold Arlen's private home movie shot during rehearsals rather than filming, which gives a glimpse of the cast rehearsing before cameras rolled. The scene itself, the actual film performance, is gone. There is one other trace. In the released film, the Wicked Witch gives the flying monkeys their instructions before the capture of Dorothy. She tells them, "I've sent a little insect on ahead to take the fight out of them." The insect she refers to is the Jitterbug. The creature it sent, the song it triggered, the exhaustion it caused, all of that was cut. The line stayed. For 85 years, audiences have heard a reference to something that no longer exists in the film. Number 6, the final cut and what it cost. The Jitterbug was not the only casualty of the editing process. After the first preview and after a second, the film lost a number of other sequences as well. A triumphal return sequence in the Emerald City, a musical celebration when Dorothy and her companions come back after defeating the witch, was filmed and removed. An elaborate extended dance for the Scarecrow after If I Only Had a Brain was cut. The reprise of Ding Dong! The Witch is Dead, which would have replayed in the Emerald City after the witch's destruction, was cut. Several scenes featuring the Wicked Witch were trimmed because test audiences found Margaret Hamilton's performance too frightening for children. The result of all this cutting was a film that, after the last song, The Cowardly Lion's If I Were King of the Forest, contained no further music for 34 minutes. The entire final act of the film plays without a song. That was not the intention. It was the consequence of removing everything that had been planned to fill it. The film that opened on August 15, 1939 at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood was not the film its makers had envisioned. It was what was left after the previews. Number 7, the film that failed and then didn't. The Wizard of Oz opened in August 1939. It won 2 Academy Awards, Best Original Song for Over the Rainbow and Best Original Score. It was nominated for Best Picture, losing to Gone with the Wind. It was not, by MGM's own studio records, a financial success on its first release. The production and distribution costs were high enough that the film initially recorded a loss of over $1 million. It was a prestige picture that did not pay for itself. What saved it was television. In 1956, CBS broadcast The Wizard of Oz on American television for the first time. Approximately 45 million people watched. It became an annual tradition. The one night a year families gathered around the set for a film that had, until then, been seen only in cinemas. By the time color television spread through American homes in the 1960s, The Wizard of Oz had become the film that showed families what color television could do. The transition from sepia Kansas to Technicolor Oz the moment Dorothy opens the door became one of the defining visual memories of an entire generation of viewers. The film is now estimated to be the most watched in history. That figure is owed not to its original release, but to every television broadcast, every VHS, every DVD, every streaming platform that came after. The Wizard of Oz became the most seen film ever made only after most of its creators were gone. Number 8, the Arlen home movie. Harold Arlen brought a home movie camera to the Jitterbug rehearsals. He was the composer of the song The Man Who, by his own account, wrote the melody for Over the Rainbow in a single sitting, and who spent 5 weeks watching Judy Garland and the cast learn and perform the number he had written for the sequence. He filmed the rehearsals informally for himself as a personal record of something he had made. Those images, grainy, silent, shot from the sidelines rather than the camera positions the final film would have used, are the only moving pictures that exist of the Jitterbug sequence. They show the cast in costume, on the forest set, working through choreography. They do not show the finished performance, they show the preparation. The footage was first publicly shown in a 1985 documentary called That's Dancing, where it appeared briefly as historical context. Since then, it has circulated in documentaries and anniversary materials. It is the closest anyone will come to seeing what was filmed. The 6 minutes that were actually shot with the full orchestra, full choreography, and the cameras that MGM had brought to make a film do not exist. The rehearsal footage does. The song does. The memory of everyone who filmed it, now gone, is what the record rests on. Number 9, the Ghost Line. There is a moment in The Wizard of Oz that most audiences have heard hundreds of times without registering what it refers to. Before the flying monkeys attack, the Wicked Witch gives them their orders. She tells them to bring her Dorothy and her dog. She warns them that the others, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Lion, will give them no trouble. And then she says, "I've sent a little insect on ahead to take the fight out of them." The little insect is the Jitterbug, the creature that bites and forces its victims to dance until they drop. The sequence that cost $80,000 and 5 weeks and is no longer in the film. The line stayed because it had already been shot, and cutting around it would have been costly, or because nobody noticed, or because the editors assumed the sequence might yet be restored. The accounts vary. What is certain is that the line of dialogue that remains in the released film refers to a scene that does not exist anywhere in that film, and that it has been sitting there, unnoticed by most viewers, for 85 years. Number 10, what was lost and what remained. The Wizard of Oz has been restored, remastered, and re-released more times than almost any film in history. The 1990th anniversary restoration brought it back to something close to its original Technicolor depth. The audio has been cleaned, the image has been stabilized. Warner Brothers, which now controls the rights, has issued it on every home format. None of those restorations have brought back the Jitterbug. The footage is gone. The nitrate negative did not survive. What the lost media community has been able to assemble, the audio, the Arlen home movie, the behind-the-scenes photographs, represents the full extent of what remains. Nobody is looking for the footage in a vault because the evidence suggests it does not exist in a vault. It exists in the Pacific Ocean, with the MGM archive trims that were dumped there in the 1970s, in whatever form cellulose nitrate takes after decades underwater. The film that generations of people know as the most watched in history is not complete. It contains a reference to a scene it no longer has. It ends 34 minutes after its last song because the songs that were supposed to fill that time were cut. And the sequence that cost more to film than most features cost to produce in 1939 is represented in the version everyone has seen by a single line about a little insect. That is the missing frame.